For decades, Republicans in Texas have been making it harder for Texans to vote. They know that their best chance to hold on to power is to limit access to the ballot. Because when more people vote, our democracy is strengthened. And when more Texans vote, Democrats win. Now, Republicans are exploiting a global health crisis to keep people from exercising their right to vote. And we won't let them get away with it. Texas Democrats will never stop fighting to expand and protect access to the ballot. In order to turn Texas blue in November, we're committed to registering and engaging a new electorate that reflects the diversity of our great state. But if we're going to be able to win, all eligible voters in Texas must be able to cast the ballot and have that vote count. When it comes to voter protection, we've taken to the courts to challenge Republican voter suppression efforts. We fought Republicans' discriminatory voter ID law and won, and beat David Whitley when he corruptly tried to purge the voter rolls. We've also launched a year-round voter protection hotline, which is helping voters navigate the voting process from beginning to end. In order to get more Texans registered to vote, we've undertaken the most expansive voter registration program in our party's history. We recently launched registertexas.com to ensure that all Texans can register to vote from the safety of their own homes. We're also mailing hundreds of thousands of voter registration applications to unregistered voters across the state. Democracy works better when more people vote. Learn more about our voter expansion and voter protection efforts by texting ACCESS to 2133.
I'm thinking of all of you today across Texas. I know the rise in case numbers is causing fear and apprehension. People are frightened, and they're especially worried about their parents, their grandparents, their loved ones who are most at risk. This virus is tough, but Texas is tougher. We can stop the spread, but it's up to all of us to do it. We have to step up and do both the simple things and the hard things to keep our families and our neighbors safe. Wear a mask, wash your hands, stay home if you can, and socially distance when you go out. I want every single American to know, if you're sick, if you're struggling, if you're worried about how you're going to get through the day, I will not abandon you. We're all in this together. We'll fight this together. And together, we'll emerge from this stronger than we were before we began. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. This is the Texas Democratic Party and Texas AFL-CIO's press conference on Joe Biden's Made in America plan that he announced earlier this morning. His plan to build back better for our economy and to make sure that Texas jobs come back to Texas after everything we've dealt with this pandemic. So joining us today are some great speakers here. We have Texas AFL-CIO President Rick Levy. We have Montserrat Garibay, the Texas AFL-CIO Treasury Secretary, Secretary-Treasurer. We have House Democratic Leader Chris Turner, State Representative Armando Walle, and then we have Leonard Aguilar and Tevita Uhatafe also joining us as well. So with that being said, I will kick this over to Rick. Rick.
Thanks, Abby, and thank you all for joining us. I was so proud to listen to Vice President Biden this morning. Joe Biden is a pro-worker, pro-labor, pro-union candidate, and we are so proud to fight for a candidate who understands us, who shares our values, and who stands so proudly for working families. And I think the plan that he laid out this morning made it clear that the needs of workers are going to be front and center in a Biden-Harris administration. That means that we're going to have a president that's focused on uniting this country, on coming together to defeat the pandemic, to dig out of the worst job crisis in a century, to address the crisis of climate change, and to end the scourge of racism. In short, under Joe Biden, we will all work together to build back better. And Joe Biden knows how to do that. And he knows that we have to foster a new wave of worker power to build an economy that works for everybody. He knows that the country works better when workers have a voice in their workplace. He knows that it's unions that built the middle class in this country, and he's not afraid to stay it. And one thing this pandemic has made clear is that it's not investors or corporate chiefs who make this country run. It's working people, the people who bring us our food, who build our buildings, who teach our kids, that make this country work. Joe Biden knows our stories. He's lived our story, and his administration will be an administration that puts our lives first. And it's not just lip service about American jobs from a president who has his campaign hats and ties and just about everything else made in China, who grants tax breaks to companies that ship jobs overseas, who's cut overtime pay, who's rolled back safety and health protections, who's sabotaged labor laws to make it easier for corporations to exploit us. Instead, we're going to have a president who's going to encourage workers to come together to have a voice on their job, who's going to expand healthcare, raise the minimum wage, provide equal pay for equal work, give us safe workplaces. It is an outrage that under this president, we still do not have a standard for occupational safety and health dealing with the transmission of things like the COVID virus. And he's going to invest in public education, not use the pandemic as an excuse to funnel money to private schools. And he will also put the power of the presidency behind Made in America. What a contrast. Somebody that will actually do what they say they're going to do when it comes to American workers. Like, how long have you heard Donald Trump talk about this week will be infrastructure week? I'm sure now it'll be right after the election. Meanwhile, Joe laid out his plan to invest in our infrastructure as well as our critical supply chain and build a modern, sustainable infrastructure and an equitable energy future, generating clean, American-made union jobs to power our future. Trump's chaotic lack of caring, expertise, and leadership has left us with a public health and an economic disaster. It's time to work with public health experts and scientists to get us out of this mess. We all want to go back to work, but we know that in order to do that and achieve the economic recovery we need, we have to get this virus under control. Look, this is the election of our lifetime. Our health, our economy, our democracy, even our planet is at stake. That's why Texas AFL-CIO and union members around the state are building the biggest, broadest, boldest political plan we possibly can do to make sure that our future reflects the values that our members hold dear. We are so proud to stand with Joe Biden, not only because Joe has the heart and the leadership to get the job done, but that Joe Biden has made it clear that he stands with us. So, Abby, I'm going to turn it now over to our Secretary Treasurer, Montserrat Garibay, for some additional remarks. Montse?
Hi, good afternoon. We are teachers and electricians and actors and engineers, pilots and public employees, social workers and hotel workers. We are the Texas AFL-CIO, our 245,000 strong fighting workers working to get a fair shot at the American dream. The pandemic has placed our unions in the forefront of demands by frontline workers, the ones who have no choice but to show up at the job, the ones who have maintained services we cannot do without for the workplace safety. 1 in 5 workers, 29 million Americans, are receiving unemployment assistance as mass layoffs continue. For 24 weeks, more workers have filed unemployment claims than any week during any previous recessions. Joe understands that unions form the backbone of this country. He's been part of the great big family that builds this nation. With a steady leadership back to the White House, Joe will also prioritize putting our people to work. That is really important. That starts with investments of $400 billion in American-made products and $300 billion into research and development programs. Under his plan, Texas will become a manufacturing hub for the technologies of the tomorrow, for autonomous vehicles to artificial intelligence. And Joe is a staunch defender to the right of collective bargaining. He supports the Protecting to the Right of Organized Act, which incentivizes organizing and penalizes employers who interfere with union elections. The best part, Joe knows how to pay for it all. He will fund his plan exclusively by closing tax loopholes and ensuring the wealthiest among us pay their fair share like the rest of us always have. This is the most important election of our lifetimes. It will determine whether millions of working people wake up each morning secure in their surroundings or searching for a lifeline. Workers deserve a president who will put them first. Biden and Harris we just can't back to the way things were before the virus. We have to build our communities. The path to presidency runs through labor, and Joe gets that. Next, we have the Texas House Democratic leader, Chris Turner. Thank you.
Thank you, Montserrat, very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with the Texas AFL-CIO and Texas Democratic Party to talk about Vice President Biden's jobs plan. I want to talk about why his plan is so necessary, so important at this time in our history. And it is so important and so needed for the American people because of the complete economic crisis that President Donald Trump has created. Let's do a quick review. The United States has now more than 6.3 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, and tragically, nearly 190,000 Americans have lost their lives because of the president's failure to control this virus. And in Texas, in our state alone, more than 13,800 Texans have lost their lives because this virus has been able to spread uncontrollably. And we've known for months now it was bad, but this morning we learned just how bad it is under this president, because the president, as early February, knew exactly how dangerous this virus was. He is in a recording released today by Bob Woodward, said on February 7th, "This is deadly stuff." Talked about how it's 5 times more deadly than the worst kind of flu strain, how it is very contagious. And then the damning admission, "I always wanted to play it down." He wanted to play it down because to Donald Trump, his reelection and his power is more important than people's health, than people's lives, and certainly than people's jobs. And that's why we find ourselves in the situation we're in. And here we are. As Vice President Biden is fond of saying, it didn't have to be this way. It didn't have to be this bad. More than 6 months into this crisis, over 13 million Americans are out of work. More than half the jobs lost have not come back. Donald Trump is the worst jobs president in American history, hands down. In Texas, more than 3.4 million Texans have filed for unemployment since this crisis began in March. And unemployment rate this July was more than double what it was last year. And so when we look at the Trump record on the economy and on the virus, he is without question the worst economic president in American history, judging by the number of jobs lost, the GDP lost. And we need someone who has a plan to come in and fix it. And that's why I'm so proud to support Joe Biden and Kamala Harris with my friends here today, because Joe Biden has a plan. He understands the value of work. He understands the value of manufacturing. He understands the power and the value of unions in organizing American workers to give workers a voice at the table. And that means decent wages, decent benefits, paid sick days. And basically, workers need to be treated fairly in this economy. And that simply hasn't happened under Donald Trump. And that's why I'm going to be proud to cast my vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris here in a few weeks. Now, it's my pleasure to hand it over to my good friend and colleague from Houston, Representative Armando Walle, who is also the COVID-19 recovery czar for Harris County.
Thank you, Chairman Turner. Thank you, Rick, Montserrat, and our friends at the Texas AFL-CIO and the Texas Democratic Party. Appreciate the ability or the opportunity to give a few brief remarks and kind of some closing remarks before our other two speakers. But I'm sitting here in Houston, Texas, with my wife and my two boys that are actually going through homeschooling. And I just imagine what we could have been doing if we actually had a national strategy to combat the virus. And that's where I'm coming from you from a personal perspective in being a father and a husband and having to juggle obviously my legislative duties, but also my duties as a husband and a father, and making sure that our children are home and safe. And so one of the things that's really bothersome about the strategy, the national strategy to combat the coronavirus, is the lack of any science-based evidence to make decisions at the national level. And so when Donald Trump talks about, and it's been widely reported on multiple occasions, that the virus would somehow magically go away, or that the virus would magically disappear, the only thing disappearing are American jobs. The only thing disappearing are American small businesses that have been trying to crack that nut into getting these PPP loans. And what's interesting, when you review those PPP loans that our small businesses were intended, these monies were intended to go to, only a very small percentage of these loans are actually going to small businesses. And so when you talk about 3/4 of all U.S. Small businesses that have applied for the Paycheck Protection Program, nearly a month into the PPP program, only 7% of small businesses have received those funds. And we all know, and I'm sitting here with our friends in labor, that small businesses are a backbone of our U.S. economy, of our Texas economy. But you don't have those small businesses if you don't have the workers to build those roads. You don't have those small businesses that would that are frontline workers that are working, constructing and building buildings. You don't have teachers. You don't have firefighters and policemen and women. And so particularly and that's on the public sector, but particularly on the small business component, when Donald Trump is only, in my estimation, is only benefiting those big corporations, the top 1% of this country, I think that's a priority problem for our country. And that's why Joe Biden has a plan to move us from the top 1%, only these policies benefiting the top 1%, but actually policies that are actually building the middle class from the ground up. And so that's why I'm proud to support Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris, because they know what it takes to win, and they know what it takes to actually view public policy from the lens of the average working person. The average working person that's actually, unfortunately, as mentioned today, many of thousands of our fellow Texans that have lost unemployment insurance, that are now grasping for a way to put food on the table. Having that family, having to go to food pantries to try to get food to put food on the table. Worrying about if they're not going to be able to get evicted from their home by not passing the HEROES Act to provide the funding to protect folks from getting evicted, right? So for us here locally, but nationally, this is a national problem that we have in America. It's a problem of conscience. It's an issue of conscience. And so I hope when our folks go to vote in November, on November 3rd, that they think about the devastation that this current administration has led us to. And so for us, as I mentioned earlier, this is not a game. This is not something to be played with. This virus is deadly. We've had probably, I would say, pushing 200,000 cases in our area, but also close to 14,000 deaths. And those 14,000 deaths are somebody's family member. Those 14,000 deaths are somebody's abuela, somebody's abuelito, somebody's aunt, somebody's uncle. And so if we want to get our economy back to where it needs to be, we have to combat this virus. We have to listen to the experts to be able to combat this virus and mitigate and control the virus. And at this point, as Chairman Turner mentioned, in the new revelatory tapes that have come out, that he's downplaying, Donald Trump is downplaying the severity of this crisis. That tells you the mindset of somebody who doesn't have empathy, who doesn't have a care for the average person, but the average American person that's trying to put food on the table. And so that's where my heart is. And that's why I think most Americans and most Texans believe that we need to go in a different direction and get our train back on track, and that American track that leads us into prosperity and not devastation and destruction that Donald Trump has led us on. And I will pass the mic over to our good friend, Mr. Leonard Aguilar, and he will give some brief remarks as well. Good to see you, Leonard. Pass it on to you.
How are you doing, Representative? Thank you. I appreciate the chance on being here, the opportunity. My name is Leonard Aguilar. I'm a proud member of the Plumbers and Pipefitters Union here in San Antonio, Texas. I'm supposed to be giving you a little bit of background about myself. I come from the construction industry. Again, as I mentioned, I'm a plumber by trade, and has had the great fortune of being a union member for over 20 years now. And in coming up through the ranks and going through the registered apprenticeship programs that are offered in our programs, and moving up, becoming an elected officer in our local, and working with our community in different aspects, I've been able to get into the position that I have now as working for the Southwest Pipe Trades Association as a political director. And our association has come out here recently in the last couple of weeks and endorsed Vice President Biden. And it's something that we are taking very seriously, and the work that we're going to be doing to help on the election that's coming up. But there's not much more I can add to the conversation at this point. I just have the perspective of coming from the construction field. I understand what it is to be a worker on the front lines, I guess you could say, never through a pandemic, and not comparing myself to anybody that's having to do it right now, because I tip my hat and all the respect in the world, and whatever trade or whatever job that you have, that you're going in day after day and providing for yourself and for your families, you have my respect, and I there's nothing that I can say to say thank you to what you're doing. But coming from the organization that I'm in, and what we're going to try to do and how we're going to work together, because everything that we're going to have to do is going to have to be done with everybody pushing in one direction. And there's a lot of work to do ahead. There's a lot of work that can be done, a lot of good work that we can do, and actually working off of facts, actually working off of the truth of what's out there. And when we come together and when we do that, we can have those conversations. There's not always going to be, we're not going to always agree on everything, but there's going to be trying to do what's right, and doing what's right is voting for Vice President Biden and Senator Harris coming up on November 3rd. So again, I appreciate the opportunity, and pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Aguilar. My name is Tevita. Uhatafe. I'm a proud member of the Transport Workers Union, Local 513, right up here in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. We just celebrated Labor Day. Americans across the nation have really come to learn, if they haven't known already, all the benefits that that unions have given union and non-union workers across the nation. The 40-hour work weeks, weekends, all the benefits that we enjoy today. Today, however, there's a war on our organizing, our collective bargaining, unions and workers, union and non-union. It's been raging on for decades, but it's coming to a peak with Donald Trump. Republican governors and state legislators across the nation have advanced anti-worker legislation to undercut our organizations and our collective bargaining. States have decimated the rights of the public sector collective bargaining, so it's harder to for our sisters and brothers who are doing public service to actually fight for their own jobs in the private sector. The culmination of stock buybacks from CEOs with this administration turning a blind eye to all the stock buybacks have really shown up here in the age of COVID, where industries like the aviation industry are looking to furlough tens of thousands of Texans because they were there was no oversight on how they were spending the cash that they were making in the past prior to COVID. These jobs and these airlines and these airports that are going to be affected affect the lifeline of Texas products that we buy because we're so prideful in what we make here in Texas, as well as our opportunity to fly to and from different parts of the state because of the lack of funding for these airlines. So the result of the lack of oversight of stock buybacks have really been tenfold in 2020, and we see it now. Joe has a plan to get these CEOs and get these companies to come back and fix the problems they're doing with stock buybacks, and not only that, but penalizing them if they continue to practice those practices, because it's workers shouldn't have to foot the bill for the actions or the inactions that CEOs have made to fatten their pockets or the investors' pockets. I shouldn't have to wait on a furlough letter coming to my doorstep to know whether or not I should be working, when the airline should have been the ones that took care of their cash flow and invested in the workers. Joe has a plan to take care of that, and I'm depending on Texas workers near and far, union members, to please look into voting for your best interests. Joe is our best interest. He's our only shot and continuing the work that we do to fight for workers here in Texas and nationally. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to all our speakers. Those were some great points from everybody. We're now going to open this up to questions and answers. To ask a question, you're going to type it into the messaging box, and we'll get to the questions on a first come, first served basis. Again, to ask a question, type it into the messaging box, and we will get to it on a first come, first served basis. Great. Okay, first question is, Donald Trump consistently polls well with union members. What is it going to take to ensure that these people vote for Joe Biden instead of Donald Trump in November? Rick, do you want to take that? Rick, I think you're muted.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that question. And I think what we saw in 2016 was a lot of union members and a lot of workers around this country in general were very clear about the fact that this economy was not working for them, and it hadn't been for a long time. And so people were open to listening to somebody who just wanted to blow it up, somebody who seemed like they were coming from a totally different perspective, and somebody who used the language of caring about American workers. And I think that what our job is, and I think what the polls show right now, is that there's been a very significant shift away from folks because they've seen actually what he does. And when we have conversations with our members, We don't talk about whether he's a good person or a bad person. People are going to come to their own. But when you focus on what has he actually done that affects working people, people's minds change. When they learn how he's gutted the protections under the National Labor Relations Board, they care about that. When they learn that he ships his jobs where he gets his campaign materials and hats and ties made in China, at the same time he vilifies China, they start to see somebody who maybe doesn't have their interests at heart. When it's been 4 years and there hasn't been a single infrastructure bill that he promised about putting hundreds of thousands of people to work, that changes their mind. So I think what our task is and what we're doing is having as many conversations as we can with our members and with the public in general to just talk about the record, talk about the facts, and demonstrate that regardless of what comes out of his mouth, because that changes all the time, if you look at what he does, you see that he does not stand for American workers.
Great. Does anybody else want to, Montserrat, do you want to add anything or?
All right, sure. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we, especially immigrants and people of color, are seeing that we are being attacked every single day by the Trump administration. And, we cannot longer stand still and be treated as disposable pieces of paper. We see every single day workers giving their best, frontline workers that have to decide whether to go to work or stay at home. And they are seeing their families who are hungry. And the most important thing that we can do as union members is to make sure that, again, like Rick said, have those conversations, but also educating ourselves on the issues. Our members, they don't care if you are a Republican or a Democrat. They care if they have quality public schools. They care if they have access to healthcare. They care if they're having better wages at their workplace and if they're treated with dignity and respect. And at the end of the day, that is something that we are really listening to them. We are hearing their stories, and the working people of Texas and our whole nation are hurting back. And when they're hurting, they are going to make sure that they show up at the ballot office, and they're going to make sure that elected officials are held accountable today, not tomorrow, but today. Thank you.
Great. All right. Looks like next question is also for our AFL representatives. Texas has one of the highest union memberships in the country. What are you guys doing to engage and mobilize unions before November?
Yeah, so what we're doing is mobilizing on a scale like we've never mobilized before. As you know, Abby, we're broken up into different regions, and each region has a specific plan based on their membership and their community to get out and have conversations. We thought we would be going door to door all over Texas, but what we're doing is paying attention to the science, and we're not putting either our campaign volunteers or our members in harm's way by trying to increase the social context. So we're having digital conversations, we're writing letters, we're writing postcards, we're communicating with well over 1 million voters in the state of Texas, not only to elect Joe Biden, but to make sure that we have a House of Representatives in Texas that reflects the values of our members, and that we flip the Texas House to make sure that there's a Democratic majority, that we take a seat back in the Senate so that we can effectively block the extreme right-wing agenda that is constantly coming out of that body, and that we win numerous congressional seats. The stakes are huge in Texas. We're not willing to allow Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick to draw the lines that are going to determine the course of this state for the next 10 years. We're mobilizing on every level to make sure that workers' voices are heard in the new Texas.
Great. Remember, for any questions, please type them into the question box right now, and we'll get to them on a first come, first served basis.
Abby, I'll just add to that our members are really thinking outside of the box, like Rick was saying. We have a lot of younger members who are pissed as hell and who are ready to roll up their sleeves and get to work. And they're utilizing social media as well to make sure that we are talking with our younger members and really utilizing social media to have those deep conversations. If we can knock doors, we can talk for sure.
Great. Looks like the next question here are for the state reps. Representative Walle, you are the head of the coronavirus response for Houston. What do you think it's going to take to build back jobs after all the devastation that Houston especially has seen?
Well, just to clarify, it's for, we have 2 recovery czars, one for the city of Houston and one for Harris County. I'm the Harris County recovery czar appointed by Judge Leonard, who has been steadfast in her response in listening to the science, her response in listening to the experts, and her diligent decision-making in early on in the pandemic, whereas other state leaders and other national leaders were, pittering around, downplaying the virus. Hidalgo and a lot of the county and city leadership, particularly from Mayor Sylvester Turner, were trying to combat the virus from the get-go. So the way we answer that is we answer it by being able to, mitigate, control, and contain the virus. That's the way we are able to get back our economy. On the flip side of that is coming into the next session, we're hearing that we could see some budget cuts to vital sectors of our budget, of our economy, and particularly in our human capital, particularly in public education, and particularly in healthcare. And so the single best thing that we could do to get jobs back is actually pass Medicaid expansion. That would bring in billions and billions of dollars to our Texas economy for Texans, because whereas we are Texans are paying for Medicaid expansion in other states, we do not have the same advantage here in Texas because, the state leadership that's been controlled over the last 20, 25 years has failed to provide that economic safety net for folks. But for winning 12 seats this last session, this previous session, we would not have had historic gains in passing HB 3, which is the public education school finance bill. That would not have happened but for teachers and a lot of our education folks clamoring, and parents asking for change. So those are 2 things that 2 big budget drivers of our economy. We pass every session a $250 billion budget. Probably 60-70% of that budget goes to public education, K through 12 and higher education, and healthcare. So those 2 things, those actually 3 things: expanding Medicaid, reinvesting in public education, and actually combating any cuts that would be coming next session would go a long way in bringing back jobs and maintaining the jobs that we've been losing since this pandemic hit.
Great. Looks like the last question we have here is again for the AFL. This election looks like it's going to be very tight. There's been polls that show both Biden and Trump up. Do you believe that organized labor might be the difference between winning and losing for Democrats in November?
I think, I think that we all have a responsibility to do everything we can. Look, the stakes are so high right now. I can tell you that if it is within our power to be the difference, we will make the difference. That's how seriously we're taking this. And I'm not talking about just in Texas. I'm talking about all over the country. Look, you heard a presidential candidate this morning stand up and say, I believe in the power of working people. I believe in the dignity of work. I believe in treating all workers with dignity and respect. That is a message that is going to mobilize our voters to vote in ways that we have never voted before, and vote for a candidate who's going to carry our banner in November. So yes, I think organized labor is going to play a very powerful role in Texas in electing Joe Biden, in electing a Democratic speaker, and in changing the dynamics of this state. No longer will politics be the province of a few right-wing ideologues, but the people are going to have their say this November.
Great.
Avi, if I could just add to that real quick, I think that the work that the Texas AFL-CIO and all of its member unions are doing is just extraordinary and is so integral to our efforts to win in Texas and specifically win the state house in Texas. And the work that is taking place under Rick Levy and Montserrat, and their entire team is just really extraordinary. So I think Rick's being a little humble. I think they're going to play a major role in a very good election day this year. We're very appreciative.
Thank you, Chris.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you all again for joining us. If you have any more questions for the speakers, please contact me at abhi@txdemocrats.org. Again, that's abhi@txdemocrats.org. Thank you guys all for joining us. Thank you all the speakers, and I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon.